3. Hi, this is Amy from Good Food Unearthed, and today I have the lovely Lynette Duncan she goes by the handle on her website and on Instagram and Twitter as Oracle of Your Soul. And I'm really excited to have her here tonight because what I want to focus on right now is exploring a part of science that is kind of been pushed to the side, and that's the metaphysical sciences, where things that are unseen still affect us, energies that affect us, planetary alignments. So I want to welcome you, Lynette, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to do this with you and to participate with your audience today. So, thank you very much.
And Lynette is a spiritual strategist and intuitive guide, and she also has a course on self love. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Free. It's free.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. It's a free course. And
Yep.
I wonder if we could start off and maybe you could tell us a bit about your background in the metaphysical sciences, working with tarot, energy, intuition,
Yeah.
astrology. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm an astrologer as well. So, I definitely, that is a core energy for me. And so, I learned astrology back in my early 20s. I had a reading, it changed my life. It all of a sudden the pieces just fell together and I realized it was such a deep healing self-help tool for me that I knew I wanted to study it. And so I did. The woman who gave the reading to me, actually I studied with her for 2 years, and she was a wonderful person. I had private instruction with her, and this was the day before like Instagram or the internet, and so I would go to her house, and so it was a really great experience for me. I didn't do much with it until I went through my Chiron return at 50. I felt like it was beyond me. It wasn't something I was going to be able to do. I'd spent many, many years accumulating other metaphysical skills. I became a life coach. I became a hypnotherapist. So I was doing a lot of things, but I was a single mother raising kids myself. So I didn't really move into it until my Chiron return, which happens around 49 or 50. And then my life just took a huge turn because I'd always wanted to, I knew my purpose was to help other people through astrology. And because I'd struggled so much to find my own purpose, I knew that that was my purpose, which of course is what it became. So I find that that's true for a lot of people that do any kind of alternative healing. A lot of times we go through our own healing experience because we have to have knowledge of the experience itself so that we can heal others through that. And so that tends to be a theme that I run into all the time with people that identify as healers on some level. And I'm talking about healing as alchemy or integration on any level. So uh, that was mine. That was my purpose, was to help other people find their purpose. It took me a long time to acknowledge that. So that's kind of the energy that I work in. And, the use of astrology and the understanding of astrology is really magical because it does help you. It's a wonderful self tool for understanding the self and self acceptance and self love. And so all of that sort of led me into, as I was healing, my own self love practice. So it feels weird that I would be like, when I think about it, I'm like, oh, I do self love and astrology. You wouldn't think those things go together, but they actually do.
And astrology, I think, is really interesting. And I wonder if you could tell us a bit more about that as an ancient tool. Maybe we could go into what you've learned about astrology and the how the different positions of the planets and where they're located that affect and how that effect actually comes about.
Well, I sort of have a little bit of a different view on astrology, and I've taken a much more esoteric spiritual approach to it. Astrology is, of course, an ancient science, and it's really about understanding basic things. But I feel like where the magic really comes with astrology is in the interpretation and in helping people to understand how to recognize the energies within themselves. So, all of the planets really reflect a certain type of frequency or a certain type of expression within you. And so each planet, the sun represents our consciousness, our awareness, our personality, our characteristics. It's a main ray. It's like a strong ray of light in our life. The moon is more of a subconscious energy that is, um, the subconscious is connected to the part of us that doesn't sleep. So it's
Mm,
also connected to a soul energy. And the moon is more of a shadow energy. The moon will show up as a shadow experience. Um, we have a lot of different, all of the different planets have different frequencies. So the moon is emotional, Mercury is mental. It's how we receive information, how we process information, how we communicate. Uh, how we interact, the things that we learn, the way that we learn, what comes into our field. So Mercury is extremely important. We're all engaging. Mars and Venus are both the components of the masculine and the feminine frequency. It's not a
mm,
gender thing, it's a type of energy. And so the Mars energy is more masculine centered. It's an energy of outward focus and outward direction. It's electric. It is focused and intentional. It creates boundaries. It creates structure. It takes action. Venus is relational. Venus is, of course, that relational component. It's connected to our values and our feminine component, which of course is more receptive and magnetic. And so we've got this yin and yang within us. Those are the personal planets, and they reflect basically our basic personality and our
mm,
likes and our wants and our certain types of just basic expressions. And as we continue to move out into the other planetary energies, Saturn and Jupiter are energies that are intermediaries. They're not quite collective planets, but they teach us about duty and obligation and personal responsibility. Jupiter allows us to move out into the world and be adventurous and willing to take risks and to understand the wisdom that we receive through our experience of life. I also engage in an asteroid on the asteroid belt called
mm.
Chiron, which your readers might be interested to know about, especially, or your listeners. Chiron is the energy of healing. It's the energy of your own wound and then how that transforms into your own healing expression, perhaps with other people. So a lot of focus there when we do work on the astrology sites. And then the outer planets, which would be Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, are considered collective energies. And so they show up in your own individual chart. They'll have a personal meaning for you, but they're also connected to the collective movement. The way that I see it is a lot of times I think people look at astrology or some of their ideas or beliefs about it is that the planets influence us. And
Mhm.
I think on some level that's true because they emit a frequency in the same way that the sun does. It's an energy that we see, it's an energy that we can identify, but all of those planets have energies that emit. And so they all reflect something, different aspects of ourself.
Mhm.
And there's also, I have a sort of a belief around that the planets actually reflect us rather than um, that we reflect the planetary energies rather than the other way around. So it's sort of a symbiosis, perhaps.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so when I look at an astrology chart, I can give a lot of insight into the way that you receive information. For example, the ascendant sign, and that energy on the ascendant is the portal to everything. And it's also the way you express in the world. And so I help people find their purpose, and I can be extremely accurate. Um, so it's just fun. I love doing it. I just absolutely love doing it. It's just an energy of self-discovery with people, and I love unlocking those doors into a deeper understanding of themselves and giving people permission to really be all of who they are.
Yeah. And I like what you say about reflecting sort of the energy that the planets have. It seems like, and I wonder if you could talk a bit about maybe the energy body of the person, but I've come across it from more of like the more physical sciences. And when you break that down and break it down and break it down and break it down, you get to this. energy or vibration. And it almost seems like if you just take away whatever you think you know about the planets or yourself, and you just have that felt experience,
Mhm.
you're a transmitter and receiver in a sense, but there's that, it's like a feedback loop that's not really separate kind of thing. It's really fascinating.
It is
Um,
fascinating.
yeah, so I wonder if you could also touch on what you've learned about energy, because I know you talk about that quite a lot.
Yeah, so the astrology chart is a snapshot of the map of your consciousness. So everything in the chart is going to reveal your tendencies, your wound. It's going to reveal where you struggle and where you have innate abilities that you've brought perhaps with you to heal yourself or to help heal others, to navigate your life. So when I look at a chart, I'm looking at the relationships between the planets because they're creating a whole different type of energy just within that interaction. There's a whole field of study called medical astrology, and you can use it to help people to understand and to pinpoint what is going on in the physical body and how and what kinds of things support that individual person. So you can really individualize a person's plan, a health plan, based on looking at their chart. And it's really fun. I mean, astrology is accurate. I mean, people can poo-poo it. That's okay. But I have a different awareness of it. And so the energies are opportunities. It's just opportunity. It's just energy. And this is how I really began to understand about spiritual strategy and understanding how to work with energy, because the planetary energies are there, but you're not a victim to that information. And so I work with people to help them understand how to use the energy in a different way than the way that they might be using it currently. Because there's always different opportunities in that energy field. That energy field or that energy frequency doesn't actually have an opinion. It is just there to exist in its frequency, the energy frequency that it is. And so understanding that gives you a lot of power,
Mm-hmm.
because then you can understand what it is and how you can work with it. And so I do a lot of that kind of stuff in my coaching practice. Did that answer your question?
Oh yes, yeah.
Okay.
And with the tarot,
Mhm.
um, could you go into a little bit about how that works? Like, what are you tuning into, and how do you get the reading that pops up? And
Well, tarot and astrology are very linked.
mhm,
The tarot cards and the way that they were formulated all relate to different planetary energies, different signs as well. And so an astrologer and tarot are really, they're linked. If you understand astrology, you can understand tarot easily. Tarot was something that I picked up to hone my own divination tool, to hone my own ability. And so I would pull cards for myself. And as I started doing that, it wasn't actually until I started reading for other people that I really started to understand the weight that tarot gave me. It was a channel. And so it helped me to understand how I was receiving my intuition.
mm,
I am a person who I'm incredibly intuitive and incredibly tuned in, but I still, even to this day, my intuition is very subtle. If
mhm,
I'm not paying attention, if I'm not trusting myself, uh, then it's just not happening, you know? So it really taught me to trust myself, to trust my instinct, to understand and feel the energy as it was coming in, and to kind of decode it, make sense of it, and then to also have a better, deeper understanding of my own confidence around what I was doing. So astrology or tarot is just telling a story. Tarot is is based on imagery, and so it's reflecting through the picture or the imagery of what the frequency is of the planets. So it's really just telling a story. And so this is why tarot works, whether you're uh, connecting it to another, you know, like I do a transits in tarot. So I look at people's transits to see what's going on. And then I do a tarot session, which a lot of times just validates it.
mhm,
So tarot is very personal in the sense that I'm working one-on-one with a person. I'm often receiving guidance directly as an oracle for that person, something that they need to hear, something that they need to perhaps shift. Um, astrology on a different on a level, so tarot is more immediate, astrology is more long term, where we're
Mhm.
strategizing how we're going to move forward. We're looking at planetary energies as they're coming in, and this is why it's a divination tool as well. And a lot of times why people poo poo it, even though it's very accurate, because it's out there,
Mhm.
but when you really move into the understanding of it and you engage with your own intuition, it can be incredibly insightful.
Yeah, and that brings me to talking about senses, because most people we're stuck on, the five senses, and then there's intuition and instinct, which, we're told intuition, you can't really trust it, you can be very wrong. And instinct is just this animal reaction, which is tied more to, subconsciously tied more to, like, oh, fight or flight, kind of,
Mhm.
not really thinking. But there's a bit more to that, and I wonder if you could talk about other senses that human beings in general have that they could access that they might not be aware of.
Well, that's a really great question and a great topic. Okay, so to me, instinct and intuition is very connected. It's almost the same thing. The thing that really, I think, divides instinct from intuition is kind of where you're at on a spiritual level, where you're at in trust with yourself, because you can have an instinct that actually can show up as a trigger, right? A wound, something that is activating you to react in a certain way. And so it can be very close between the actual event and then that reaction, right? So that instinct can be a reaction. And so it takes a little bit of spiritual fine tuning to really hone your intuition. Now, some people have, and I can see this in the chart, some people have more innate intuition than others. Some people have to really strengthen certain muscles and certain abilities that they have, but everyone is intuitive. It's just a matter of some people are definitely more, especially empathic. Empathy is an energy that is a bodily sensation, is an ability to sense the energy of another person or to read the energy of a room or in the collective. And that does require some skill to really trust yourself, because I feel like the intuition most of the time is initially the first response, is the
Mhm.
first idea, the first inclination, but we're so used to pushing that down and not trusting ourselves, or that we've been raised in a belief over and over again that we're wrong or whatever that is. And so we don't learn to trust that. And
Mhm.
so I find that most of the time there is that initial thought or feeling is part of the intuitive response. And so it does take a little bit of personal work, I think, to really hone that so that you understand how your personal energy works. And the more you trust your intuition, the stronger it gets. It's just like a muscle.
Mhm.
So, for example, with me, I was understanding as I was doing the work and working with people that I would feel the energy in my face and in my throat. And if I hadn't been aware of what was happening and I didn't have an intention to strengthen my intuition, I probably would have just it would have just been like a weird physical sensation. But
Mhm.
it actually was the energy moving through me and it wanted to come through. And so I became this oracle, and I was able to, achieve really a lot of accuracy simply because I was learning to trust myself on a deeper level.
Mhm.
So I think it's very nuanced and subtle. Some people have a stronger experience of it than others, but I do feel like, especially the energy that we're in and this spiritual expansion that we're all having, we're going to be engaging that with that more and more. But intuition doesn't work if you don't trust yourself. Those two things go hand in hand. They have to be engaged together.
Yeah. And what I find really interesting about that is I interviewed a doctor a year ago now, and one of his mentors said something that I thought was very interesting. And he said, when you're speaking to a patient, really what you need to do is to shut up and listen and let them talk to you. And they'll usually tell you exactly what they need. And
Mhm.
what I find interesting about that and putting it together with what you've said is that people already know what they need to do to help themselves, but then there can be this maybe this bombardment of dialogue that comes in to cover it up, and then you get caught up in that like sort of a washing machine of a story, where
Mhm.
you then all of a sudden you still feel it, but it's kind of clouded over in a
Mhm.
way.
Sure.
um, yeah, so I what's really fascinating to me, going a bit back to the planets and how
Sure.
things are interconnected,
Mhm.
um, I always like to look at, if I discover something in one aspect, is it true in other aspects in nature? And so for the human body, exploring that, and then when I look out into space, I could try to make parallels for, cells, how cells function with the
Mm.
nucleus and,
Mhm.
with the center and that sort of thing. And I wonder if you could share a bit about what you've learned through working with energy, how all of these things are interconnected, um, what you might have discovered through that and working with your different clients. And
Wow, okay, big stuff here. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I really feel like that it all really comes down to trust, because that trust is it's integral to, I think, our human experience, right? We don't trust ourselves to know, even to be individuated enough to know, uh to not only tune in, but to also trust what the energy and the information that might be coming in. So what I notice about, especially about healing, as we relate it to like the cosmology of the planets or in the body, it's all related. I feel like it's everything as within, so without. And so this is why astrology works even in health related circumstances, because as the chakras are related to different bodily functions and organs, so are the planets. The planets all have a specific purpose, as well as the signs. They govern certain areas of the body. Um, what I understand, what I've experienced and observed about healing is that healing really comes when a person is engaged in a conscious way with their experience. And so if you have a person who's not really trusting themselves on an intricate and basic level, then there can be blockages that come in. The consciousness is actually what opens up the potential and possibility for healing to occur, because a lot of times when someone is healing, they have to make changes, right? They have to be aware of what they're doing that perhaps is causing an imbalance.
Mhm.
And of course, healing, is it's all relative, essentially. I mean, we've heard about spontaneous healings,
Mhm.
miraculous healings. We know from the work of Joe Dispenza and Bruce Lipton that the energies, it's not so much about the things that we do as much as it's about how we feel. So I feel like there's got to be a consciousness that awakens on some level, that we become self-authored when we become personally responsible for our experience. So to me, it feels like a smaller version of, and I don't want to be blasphemous here in any way, but just a smaller version of the whole cosmos, the God, the sourced energy
Mhm.
of that awareness of being responsible for everything that we're doing and being intentional with our thoughts, our deeds, the things that we put in our body, the kinds of emotions or, thoughts and things that we entertain. We tend to be in grooves about that. That's what the patterns are about. And so I feel like a lot of times when I notice people that are in that experience of healing, or coming into consciousness, certain things have to happen first. Maybe some of your listeners or even yourself have noticed that healing happens in layers. It's like peeling, an onion. I hate the onion whole analogy, but it's so great. I mean, who really wants to be an onion? But it has those sort of centrifugal rings that sort of, you're going to deal with surface stuff first, and you're going to start pulling that stuff back. I do feel like absolutely what we surround ourselves with, what we put in our bodies, what we ingest is definitely a part of that. But I think that's connected to the level of consciousness that we have as well.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I'm big on is empowering people into taking control of their health again and doing exactly that. And I wonder if we could talk about how people can tune in to read their own path, and what with your experience working as an intuitive guide with coaching and with self-love, what advice do you give to people to help them to start, helping themselves?
Well, I think self-love is key. I
Hmm.
feel like we're coming out of an era on the planet of darkness and of deception in a way. And we are not really given information about how powerful we actually are. And we haven't been taught to self-love. We haven't been taught to consider ourselves. Uh, and our parents weren't taught that, and their parents weren't taught that. And so the reason why I incorporate self-love so strongly in the work I do is because it brings you back into the cosmology of yourself, right? It allows you to tune into your body. It allows you to tune into your emotional experience, which is always going to be connected to a health response, and perhaps creating dis-ease. And so I think self-love is one of the most important ways to begin that process, because even on a bigger scale, even though there may be things that are kind of coming together, and you're in a healing, cycle, or in a healing moment with yourself, that self-regard has to happen. And so when you validate yourself, when you start validating your feelings without judgment, but simply being present with them and letting yourself feel the energies of the emotions that perhaps you've been suppressing,
Hmm.
you're able to heal on an energetic and an emotional level. And I think that does have a huge effect on the physical body. Um, did that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah.
I can
I
expand on that,
well,
but I
yeah,
sort of got
yeah.
lost
I
there.
think
Sorry.
I might give you like a couple of questions to go into that.
Sure. Mhm.
Uh, One of the things that's interesting about healing and being a healer is there's the term physician, heal thyself,
Yeah.
and being taught to um, give for others before yourself is kind of, I've always found that really interesting, because if you're not healthy, if you're not happy, then that actually changes everything around you. Whereas
Mhm.
if you and it's almost it's nothing that is kind of, you have to be far out there to think that. You can feel that. Like, I think children can feel that when they're happy, then everything that they do, everything that they experience, it's all a different flavor.
Yes.
um, and I think you might have actually posted on this earlier today,
Mhm.
but I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that. And to go with that, I want to mention you talked about spontaneous remission. And
Mhm.
there's this book that I read. I can't remember the author, the name, but it is about cancer and people who were given. They were told that their cancer was terminal and there was nothing left to do. And this woman, she interviewed a lot of people who were in that state and they had spontaneous remission, and she found 9 things that were common amongst all of them. But one of them that was really key was that they decided that it was not a war that they had to win. They decided to love their cancer and to ask it why it was there.
Mm.
And I think that really matches with what you were saying.
Yeah, to kind of, model what we had talked about earlier about just healing and the experience that you have as a healer. It's almost like an initiation, right? You're going to heal what is imbalanced within you in order to become and to step into that shaman work with another person, right? And so um, it just makes sense to me. And I healed through self-love. That's why I teach about it, because it healed me so profoundly. And for me, it wasn't necessarily a physical thing, even though I had physical results from it. It was more of an emotional thing. And that was really where my trauma was. And it was very deeply seated within me. And so, uh, self-love, the magic that I found with self-love is this component which we haven't been taught in our society. And of course, part of that deception and part of that shadow that is concealed from us is the power that we actually have to do exactly that, to heal ourselves, because
Mhm.
there's whole industries that are based on us not being well on a lot of different levels.
Yeah.
But I feel like self-love is about taking the power back, and what I find that is, and what it does is it pulls you back into understanding. When you heal yourself through self-love, especially from an emotional experience, any kind of trauma, when you have that experience of yourself, it validates you on such a level that it empowers you. And then you're very much more aware of certain things, that are out there, certain choices that could be made that you're going to maybe just naturally avoid because you're just more conscious.
Mhm.
So I healed through self-love, but I feel like this was the missing key. This has sort of been obscured, I think, through humanity. There's been this whole idea in that sense of, heal others first,
Mhm.
and always be giving. And so I work even with a lot of people and even a lot of healers. I work with a lot of healers that come to me for self love stuff and for self love guidance, because a lot of times it's the very last thing that they will engage in. It's the
Mhm.
very last thing that they're dealing with on their own personal level of trauma or whatever it is. It doesn't really limit them from being a good healer, but it does, they're not in the fullest capacity that they can be in if they're not in self love, because self love really increases the intuition. So
Mhm.
it increases your intuitive ability, not just for others and your ability to guide and to navigate an experience with another person, but it's also that intuition for yourself and what it is that you need and how you need to set boundaries. Because as a healer, we all know, but boy, you're giving energy, a lot of energy to
Mhm.
your sessions. And you've got to be able to understand what's going on in you so that you can set boundaries, so that you can say, okay, I can only work a few sessions a day. I need 4 days off, whatever that is.
Mhm.
I work with a lot of empowered law of attraction strategy. And
Mhm.
so it's all connected. If you're a healer that is really service minded, you can't forget yourself,
Yeah.
because you do get upside down. And I just, it makes my heart hurt when I see really gifted healers in really kind of challenging physical experiences or health related experiences. And usually that is what it is that
Mhm.
there is just not enough attention to the body and to their own physical experience. And of course, it's going to affect what they're able to do. So a lot of times a physical reaction or some kind of an awareness, right, will
Mhm.
bring them back into the body, because I feel like the energy just naturally brings us back here one way or the other, you know, to
Mhm.
really focus on what is important for us and how we do it, because everybody's wired differently. We
Right.
all need different things. And this is what I love about what I do and with astrology, because it helps me to help another person navigate their own experience, because that's their map. They
Right.
chose that date, that time, that those parents, that location. The chart is an energy signature of what's available to them. And so there's positive and negative attributes for all of that. So we want to operate on the highest optimal frequency that we can, especially as healers.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that with the healing yourself first, I did a lot of learning in Buddhism and the philosophy of that. And one of the key phrases that always pops up for me is know thyself. And if
Mhm,
you can see yourself as many, because you are actually, and you're
mhm,
never the same.
mhm,
So what's also very fascinating is with the energy, like you may take in some energy that, wasn't coming from you, but came from elsewhere. And so when you have that self-love, that's totally non-judgmental. So it's
mhm,
from a different space of
mhm,
saying, well, yes, this is very turbulent energy and it's causing this reaction in me, but
mhm,
I'm going to sit with it. There's a story. Milarepa was the name of this. It's a myth. And he's a yogi. He goes into a cave. And one night he's greeted by his demons. And so the demon comes into the cave and he basically it's kind of my story to tell for like self-love, and if you're feeling depressed or overwhelmed, is just greet it. Ask it to come in, ask it what message it's trying to give you, have a conversation and see where you go from there. But then it doesn't overwhelm you, kind of a thing. So yeah, that's really amazing. I wonder if we could touch a bit on truth, because you
Okay.
mentioned about validation. And
Yeah.
what I've found through all of this unveiling that's happening this year,
Mhm,
and a lot of this stuff that's being unveiled has been happening for a very long time, but
mhm,
there are so many people now who are questioning, how do I know what's true? And
mhm.
they're looking for sources outside of themselves to validate, what it is they find. So I wonder if you could talk a bit about truth.
Well, that's a really interesting thing because there's this whole thing around what's my truth, right?
Hmm.
Like, my truth should be your truth, right? I find that as a collective consciousness, we're moving out of this disempowerment of being told what the truth is.
Hmm.
And so everything's being rewired back into the physical reality of ourself. And so this is when we start talking about what resonates, right? What rings true.
Hmm.
Because in my own experience, through my own healing journey, different things have been true for me at different times in my life. And I will evolve out of certain truths and adopt different truths that seem almost like a higher vibration. Um, but I feel like the thing that's interesting about the whole truth scenario right now is that many of us are waking up to the understanding that there's been a manipulation that has happened across the globe. And I can't explain it other than it is a spiritual awakening. It is like light or some kind of energy is activating the planet. When I work with people in their own awakening and coming home to themselves, it isn't something that is planned, it's something that happens, and
Hmm.
everybody's on their own timeline for that.
Yeah.
So I think that when a person awakens to the truth on a deeper level within them, that's an empowering experience. And then once that happens, they're on a trajectory to pay more attention to their triggers and their behaviors and the things that they've been taught and their old like habits and things like that. And it's about learning how to really understand what rings true for you. And that will always guide you to the truth ultimately, even if
Hmm.
it shifts and changes into something that's a deeper understanding. And this is why I feel like self-love is the key right now, because it's all about that pulling that energy in and
Hmm.
trusting the inner wisdom. Because I really feel very deeply on a spiritual level that each of us is an extension of source energy, that we all carry that frequency of intelligence. And the more that we have an intention to really hone in on that and to trust that, everything is amplified. Our intuition, our knowledge, our inner guidance, all of that just clicks in. And this is why we know then what is best for us.
Hmm.
I think, especially right now, we're definitely moving out of this whole idea about, well, let me back up. There's been
Hmm.
something that's been happening in the field for like the last 5 years, and that's this individuation. As we're moving towards Aquarius, we are individuating more, which is why the self love is important, because we've got to get in touch again with our own individual construct of that source energy and how we're expressing that. So we're bringing all of that energy in, and we've been healing through different layers of reality. And as we do that, we tend to wake up and we tend to see things for what they are rather than what we're being told that they are, because it doesn't feel right. And the more you tune in and the more you trust yourself, the more you can see that. And so what I notice is that a lot of people waking up to the same truths, even though they're all having a different experience. So truth is kind of, based on each person and where they're at in their experience of life, because sometimes truths change.
Hmm.
What's true at one point may not be true again eventually.
Hmm.
And so that's going to go for, health too. And that's why you want to really just focus on the body. And I'm really an advocate for really just tuning in. I give my body what it needs. I don't really ask it questions. My job is to just show up to just be in the alignment with myself. So it's a personal thing, but I feel like each one of us is individuated. And so those things actually, go together, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And what you were touching on is actually what I'd like to talk about next, which is what is happening right now. And I wonder if you could talk a bit more about what we're seeing happening, especially towards the end of this month and the next few days, astrologically and energetically for the collective, for all of us.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, we are in a really monumental time, and we have been in a really accelerating energy for several years. The beginning of 2020 was really marked by the Saturn Pluto conjunction that happened in Capricorn. This was a very old signature that was like on a 500-year cycle. Saturn moves very quickly. Well, not very quickly, it moves faster than Pluto, but the fact that they connected together in the sign of Capricorn had a specific meaning. And so all of 2020 and everything that we saw on the globe and all of the stuff that we witnessed was a reflection of that energy. Um, Pluto and Saturn are manipulative energies, and they carry a lot of dark frequencies. So that was, I think, the tipping point this whole year. Woke a lot of people up because I'm in that business, so I'm watching people wake up, and they've been waking up in waves. That tends to be the thing. There does seem to be this component of when you heal, it is radiated out into the collective. It's a very healing energy that you emit. It helps other people to move into that direction. And so that the more people wake up and become empowered, it allows other people, it's like a channel or a trail that you're blazing as you move it through your own healing, that it allows other people to come into their own healing. I'm really noticing that. So 2020 was really marked by Saturn and Pluto, the energies of change and the energy of structure. And Saturn is a structured energy that creates a foundation. Pluto is the energy of change and demolition and destruction, but it's also the phoenix and the butterfly energy, as we rise. So wherever people were in their own evolution, they were going to have that whatever experiences was needed. So it has created a lot of division, I think, but it's also awakened a lot of people because Pluto's highest energy is empowerment. Pluto is going to remain in Capricorn, where it's been for several years until mid 2023, and then it also moves into Aquarius just as Saturn leaves Aquarius. So to talk about today specifically, we have both Saturn and the sign of Jupiter in the sign of Aquarius, the planet Jupiter, excuse me, in the sign of Aquarius. These are both actual ancient rulers of Aquarius. Jupiter is the esoteric ruler and the higher energy of Aquarius. Saturn is more of an old ruler of Aquarius. Aquarius is an energy of unification. It's an energy of individuation. Aquarius is an energy that is a higher octave of Leo. So in Leo, it's more of a personal experience of confidence, of self-expression, of creativity. It's that extension of source through us. That is really, Leo is the energy that is really modeling the energy of source consciousness as it expresses through us through creativity and romance and all of that. But Aquarius is the opposite energy of Leo. So Aquarius energy is just a higher version of that state of individuality and that state of confidence within the self. And what's really beautiful about Aquarian energy is that when we go through the individuation process through self-love, we are confident in who we are. We no longer look outside us for answers. We know what feels right. We're going to make that choice. And so we're not dependent on other people or other structures to give us that guidance. And so that is empowering. Aquarius is an energy that empowers to the highest degree of humanity. And in that individuation, we love our quirks and our flaws and the way that we express. And because we've learned to love ourselves through that experience, we then accept that in others. And so that is what empowers the diversity in others. And that actually is a unifying principle. It brings us together because we're not in that duality anymore where we think that everybody has to do and be just like us. We are
Yeah.
happy and comfortable in the choices that we're making, and we have no personal investment in whether or not somebody's making those choices. So it's in that we sort of detach from the whole experience. We can stay in a vibration of love with ourselves and other people because we recognize what someone else may be going through. We've been through that. We don't have an interest anymore in judging that. And I feel like this is how we bring humanity together, because Aquarius is the sign of the water bearer, and the water, a lot of people think Aquarius is a water sign. It's not. It's an air energy, and so we're moving into an era of communication, of new thought, innovation. We're definitely going to see improvements, and I think a lot of suppressed technology that's going to start coming forward in the health related fields, new methods of things that heal, awareness of that, because Aquarius is a humanitarian energy. That's what the bearer is the water, and the jug of water represents knowledge and information.
Mm.
So that is the key here, because we're all coming into a much, much higher state of consciousness, as a whole, and then individually. So Saturn, Jupiter, which are the energies of structure and expansion. Now, those are very contrarian energies together, but they are holding a frequency of the new vibration, of the new era of consciousness. So we're laying structures in a new vibration of energy that is really the highest energy of the human experience. These create ages and eras. This is a long process. But today, those energies moved into Aquarius, and those were partners in the 2020 conjunction. So they're taking all of the energies that were activated through 2020, and now they're moving together into the energy of Aquarius. So they're taking whatever was revealed to you this year about your own empowerment, your own structures, what foundations, what structures needed to be collapsed, and where you can expand. So we're building new foundations in innovation, and we're in expansion. So when the other partner of the 2020 energies, Pluto, enters Aquarius in mid 2023, as Saturn leaves and goes into Pisces, then it's just, astrology is layers of cycles upon layers of cycles. It's kind of it's hard to explain astrology, and when you really get it, it's kind of even hard to explain it.
Mhm.
But these energies are definitely accelerating us. They're accelerating our consciousness because it's an air energy.
Mhm.
Saturn and Jupiter both, they travel together. They are, Jupiter will go through a sign about once a year. Takes
Mhm.
about a year to go through a sign. Saturn is more like 2.5 years.
Mm.
So Jupiter moves much more quickly, but they do conjunct. They do travel together like they are now. For the last 250 years, they've been traveling in earth signs. So there's been a certain frequency of density,
Mhm.
um, of the whole energy of earth, which is materialization, manifestation, density, that sort of thing, of focus, capitalism. Okay,
Mhm.
we could think about that, right? It's all that kind of energy. Now that they're moving together in air, this is a change. This is a major shift that's happening, because these energies have only been traveling together in earth. Now they're traveling together for the next cycle of 250 years in air. And so we're moving into an era of technology. We're moving into an era of innovation
Mhm.
and humanity, and bringing the collective together. One of the things, because all the energies always have a sort of a shadow frequency, the appearance of AI, right?
Mhm. Right.
The tech giants, all of that, they're also very aware of what's going on. So they're using that to their advantage, because that air energy is governed by what it is that they do.
Mhm.
The technology, the internet, social media is all governed basically by Aquarius. So they're using, I don't want to say they, but it's being used for that purpose.
Mhm.
And it's up to us to decide how we want to use that consciousness
Right.
and what we're going to do about it.
Mhm.
because we're not the time of that shadow not being able to see things and to kind of pull the wool over our eyes is over.
Hmm.
Air energy is very revealing. It's very fast moving energy. It can create a lot of anxiety, which can be misunderstood as um, which can be misunderstood. A lot of times, anxiety is excitement,
Hmm.
anticipation,
Right.
your cells getting ready for that leap of consciousness. I'm sure you might be aware of like the 100th monkey, right? That whole scenario, um, where the monkey there he was the monkeys were being observed in nature, and they observed one monkey taking a root of a sweet potato or a yam, washing it in the river, and then eating it. And the monkeys had always been observed of just eating the roots with the dirt on. Well, when this monkey went to go and wash it in the water, the congregation of monkeys saw that monkey doing that, and so it started doing that. And what was observed is that when that community of monkeys actually started washing their food, other um, congregations of monkeys all around in different locations, jungles, wherever, started doing the same thing. It's really
Hmm.
interesting. Of course, I'm not
Yeah.
telling it very well, but I do feel like we're reaching a tipping point. I do
Hmm.
feel like Aquarius is going to bring us that energy, that empowerment. As soon as Pluto especially moves into Aquarius in 2023, Pluto is the sort of he has a longer orbit, and so he's in a sign for much longer periods of time, like 30 years. So when Pluto moves a sign, that's significant.
Hmm.
And the energy that it moves into is all of this really fast moving air energy of revelation,
Hmm.
essentially. And the veil coming off, it's enlightenment, because that's what Aquarius rules.
Yeah, I want to touch on, you were talking about how when you understand astrology, it can be difficult to explain, and I think that's very true when people start trusting their intuition. There's really not a language, a specific language, because
Yeah.
language is a fixed form, so it's
Mhm.
just carrying this imprint, and you have to unbox that. But
Truly.
the way you were talking about it, and you were talking about the earth and the air, um, it made me think of how, in these octaves and frequencies, um, I heard recently that in the human body, we're mostly composed of water, and the tissues are sort of structured water. And when you
Mhm.
break it down, it's really interesting that the molecules, it's just simple like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. So you've got this water with something that's binding it. And the only difference, like say you take a glucose molecule and you compare it to a fat molecule, there's still both carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, but they're different shapes,
Sure.
And so what it sounds like is when we have a lot of frequencies and we use the terms of like earth, air, water, fire,
Mhm.
that could almost imply how that frequency moves at
Mhm.
what speed,
Yeah.
and then how it moves within us. And what's fascinating as well is our bones have apatite crystals in
Mm.
them. So we
Mm.
have like these crystalline structures that we are, and then different frequencies, they're either very slow, so they
Mm.
almost seem static, and that would be the things like this hard table that seems like it's not moving at all, right?
Right.
And
Right.
then you have the air, like all around, where you can't see what's in the air, but there are
Mhm.
things in the air.
Sure.
And yeah, so it's interesting that, with Aquarius, that quick moving, that air type of energy. I want to touch on before we finish
Sure.
um, the concept of time, because you were talking about how everybody is on their own timeline. And I know there's a lot of people right now who feel very scared. They feel overwhelmed and they feel like we're coming to this point in time where, if we don't make the right decision, then everything's gonna fall apart, or if we don't do this now, or we don't do this now. So I wonder if you could talk about how you see time.
Wow, this is something that I'm sort of deconstructing because time is such an interesting concept. the fabric of it and how it isn't real. So I'll see if I can articulate it. So yes, I feel like time is fluid. Time, like even in the same example, that time, that spontaneous healing, it doesn't necessarily, time doesn't determine healing. It's what happens is when we have a focus, for example, in fear, right? There's certainly a lot to see in our world right now that is definitely activating fear as a collective and in the individual. And I would be lying if I said that that wasn't true for me as well. There's definitely fear that I manage around what's going on. I think what the point of empowerment for me is it all comes back to trust, right? It all comes back to trusting that I'm going to make the decisions that I need to make. I do feel like we're rapidly coming to a place where we get to make that choice in a louder voice because we're all moving into a sovereignty. That's really what Aquarius is. So that is a movement that's unstoppable. Now, how we transition
Mm.
into that energy going to be interesting. I work with a lot of people that feel like they're here for this purpose, to hold a vibration, to hold a frequency, to hold a thought about that. I understand that the thoughts that I think, the thoughts that I entertain, what I put into my body as far as information, and what I watch and what I witness is part of the purity of the process, and that's a decision that you have to make. Because if you're really tuning in to the dying system, of
Mm.
course, it's going to scare you because you can feel it collapsing. Like, I feel like that's what the fear is connected to, is that that old vibrational matrix is collapsing. It's been collapsing for a long time. In fact, it is collapsed fully. People feel that and it freaks them out because they don't understand what that is.
Mm.
And if they're stuck in a vibration of whatever their beliefs are about what's going on, then it determines their reality.
Mhm.
But and this is where we really come into quantum physics and the ability to really be in the state of, there is no difference between that spontaneous healing event and, something that would take 30 years to heal something. It's just a matter of what kind of focus and intention that you have and what kind of food you're going to put in your body or what you're going to listen to, what you're going to watch, what you're going to endure. And so this is why the personal choice is so important. And this, of course, brings us back to the self-love and brings us back into the core, because even though I can see what's going on and I have some, there's a part of me, my human, that has some trepidation about it,
Mhm.
I also have an awareness in my own inner guidance that I'm here to be a bridge, to pull people through, to help people to understand how empowered they are,
Mhm.
because I feel like that's the missing mystical energy that's been lost, is that we've forgotten, through manipulation, that we actually are empowered beings. And once we engage in that, I think we're going to amaze ourselves at what we can accomplish as a human race. So, what you really focus on and what you digest is going to largely affect the kind of experience that you're having. Um, I actually feel really calm. I feel calm and peaceful, and I feel very elevated in this energy, especially today has been just amazing energy, even though there's all kinds of stuff going on in the world, And I was I was married to a nature path. I didn't, I raised my kids very organically with herbs, and we just didn't do the medicine thing. We didn't do the
Mhm.
doctor thing. So this is me. This has been me for a long time, um, and I've been aware of what's been coming, for a long time as well. So uh, I do feel like that what we expose ourselves to and what we allow ourselves to engage in is really important. And this is again another consciousness concept, right? That you understand that you're a creator of the
Mhm.
things around you and the experiences that you have, because it comes from that place of empowerment. And that has to be a personally felt experience. It's not something you can bestow on someone. It's not even something that you can go to a healer and get. A person has to be empowered in their own, it has to be their own choice. It has to be their own empowered consciousness. And so A lot of the people that I work with feel sort of elevated by this energy, even though there's a lot going on. And so we feel like our job is to really keep a focus and an intention on what we want to create rather than what we see collapsing. And I think that's a big difference.
Mhm. And maybe just to finish off, because I think a lot of the fear stems from, seeing that destruction and the unknown. And I don't know actually what your views are on this, so it'll be interesting. Um, I think you'll have a really wonderful answer. Um, if you could talk about um, death and dying
Mm.
and our perceptions around that, because there's definitely been a lot of manipulation around that concept for people. It's causing a lot
De-
of fear. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think that I'm still unpacking that. I feel like I'm still really understanding that on a deep, deep level. Um, the death experience, there's a lot of course, grief and trauma connected to that. Um, I personally have no fear about dying because I've known for 30 years that if it came down to it, I was going to fight for freedom. And if I expire in that experience, that's going to be okay. And this is why the work that I'm doing now is so important. People die. We're human. It's part of the experience. I feel like the fear that we have around that even creates to our own state of disease, that because we're so afraid of it, because we've had our own experience of loss, and then of course the unknown.
Mm.
um, I feel like I feel like death is an upgrade into being back into the connection of the source, the soul energy. And so the things that are connected to the human experience become energy as part of that soul's imprint. And this is why, of course, we're in karmic cycles. Interestingly enough, I think karma is resolving.
Mhm.
Um, that's a bigger topic, perhaps, but I feel like we're moving on beyond a reincarnation cycle.
Mm.
And I'm sensing that. I don't have proof of that, but I'm sensing that that's kind of what we're doing because we're moving into empowerment. We're moving into this state where the physical body will be more eternal, and live longer. Our cells regenerate, our body every 7 years or so, and there's not a reason for us to die. It's really a construct because we think that's what we expect.
Mhm.
Everybody dies, and so we expect that that will happen. And I think there's going to be a consciousness shift around that as well, which is going to allow us to live in a different state of reality where we're not having that experience.
Mhm. Yeah, that'll be really fascinating to see. And um, yeah, it's a great way to end off, because I think there's a lot of that fear of I think one of the things that's interesting is with you talking about self-love and being in alignment, and everybody has almost in a sense had their contract for why they're here, and you help them to find their purpose. Part of me feels that when people feel fear, it's almost like a signal that you're not doing what you really want to be doing.
Mhm.
And so if you were to die now, you really wouldn't be too happy about it, kind of a
Right.
thing.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's disempowerment. When
Mm.
you connect with your power, your own empowerment, um, the it just changes. The game changes. Even in an environment that we're in right now, even with all the manipulation and all of the deception, empowerment is possible. It isn't connected to what's going on a different level, and so that is not something that anybody can control.
Mhm.
And that's really where the power is for us. And so of course this is going to be aeons, right? This is going to be a gradual state of illumination for humanity, but we're there. There's a lot of discussion about whether or not we're truly in the Aquarian age. No matter what side of the fence you're on around that, we're moving in that direction and we're feeling it.
Mhm.
So no matter what, we're leaving the age of Pisces. We are moving into the age of Aquarius. We are going to have different experiences because that's how the ages work. And so we want to get on board with our own empowerment. We want to get on board with our own individuation and our own sense of direction and intention. And then we can come together as a collective and say, this is our intention. This is what we want to create. And I think it's just going to be magical, you know? And so I really trust that people that can't see it, don't see it, aren't awake yet, they're exactly where they need to be for their own state of evolution. This is why we don't need to pick apart what they do or what they eat, because we know we can't change people. We know we can't manipulate them to do what may be best for them. They have to make that choice. I mean, that's just so essential. We understand that, even though we don't act like it sometimes. But when we're all fully engaged in this empowered sense of individuation, when we put our minds together and our intention together, I think we're going to really just blow the lid off the human experience. And that's the point. You know, that really is the point. We've heard in the past civilizations rising up and rising into the heavens and disappearing off the face of the earth, and we don't know why. And I think that that might be connected. I don't know, I have an inkling about that, but I think anything is possible, and so we're definitely moving into an experience. And I got this sort of breakthrough today. We're done sort of shaming people for their choice. That's sort of done. You're making your own choice. You can speak about it, you can teach about it, you can offer the information, but we're done being personally invested in the choices that other people make, because that's part of our healing.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a wonderful place to end it off, because I think that was really empowering. So thank you so much,
You're so
Lynette, for
welcome.
coming on to the show. This was Lynette Duncan, Oracle of Your Soul, and please visit her website, oracleofyoursoul.life. I'll have a link in the description. She's also on Twitter. She's on Instagram and YouTube, and she'll be moving to some alternative platforms, Parler, Telegram, and MeWe. It's MeWe, right?
I think so. Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not doing a lot of activity there right now, but I'm going to be transitioning over. I just wanted to say something
Mm,
really quick about, some of the new rules and things that are happening. I mean, I don't know. I'm feeling super defiant about that in a
yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be dictated about where I'm going to spend my time and how
Mhm.
I'm going to spread my word.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stay on Instagram. I'm going to be posting on other platforms in case Instagram somehow disappears.
Mhm.
But, I'm going to soldier on, because letting other people, I just don't want to be in a space where I'm letting those kinds of factors determine how I'm doing my thing. So that's
Yeah.
really an individual choice.
Mhm.
But yeah, you can find me in all those places.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lynette.
You're very welcome.